I wanted to talk now about federal and actually state and local regulatory agencies, especially those that deal with firearms, and most specifically the BATF, or as I guess it's called now, the BATFE. Now, I think it's important to address this because for some reason a lot of pro-gun people who are pretty good on guns feel like they have to extend a certain degree of deference to the government, or if not the government, certain parts of the government, usually military and law enforcement. And I don't want to I don't think that you should give deference to the government, especially the military or law enforcement. But for this, I'm just going to say that if you're a gun owner, you don't owe anything to the BATFE. You don't owe any deference to them. You shouldn't treat them with any kind of deference at all. It's a mistake to do so. They do nothing for gun owners. They do nothing for gun safety, and they do nothing for legality. I don't know the whole history of the BATFE, but what I do know is that over the years, they, for those who pay really close attention, are kind of in the habit of manufacturing stories, manufacturing press for their own benefit, and often to the detriment, and indeed in some cases to the fatal detriment to what are basically innocent and law-abiding people. 3 incidents come to mind here. The first, of course, is Ruby Ridge. I'm not going to do a video on Ruby Ridge. It was clearly a case of an attempt to get publicity on a bust, and it went bad. The second and biggest is obviously Waco, where I think 73 people died. It was the FBI who actually did it, but it was the ATF that started it. Anybody who looks into that, it's very clear that the ATF purposely wanted a show. They were getting a lot of heat because of Ruby Ridge, actually, and they figured if they had a big bust on a group of, how should we say, Branch Davidians were not your typical Americans, I guess you could say, at least in some regards. And they figured that that would be a lot of good positive press, and of course it didn't work out, and a lot of people died. And then very recently, there's been the so-called gun runner scandal, where ATF has been purposely allowing guns to flow into Mexico. I've heard 2 different plausible reasons as to why they would do this. The first one I heard was that they wanted to start finding these guns and saying, look, guns from the United States going into Mexico is a big problem, we need more power. The other thing I heard is that they were hoping to make a big bust in Mexico where there would be a cache of these guns, and then basically say the same thing. I guess those are similar goals. And apparently some law enforcement officers, some Border Patrol agents were actually killed with some of these guns. And some whistleblowers in BATF actually alerted the press. And Gun Owners of America has been talking about it. I suppose the NRA, probably Cal on the NRA radio has probably talked about it, although they don't pursue it as much. The Gun Owners of America has long supported the abolition of the BATF. NRA, as far as I know, doesn't, and I don't know why. Now, what I like to say is that these are 3 real well-known examples of ATF abuse. There's probably hundreds of other cases that are just not as dramatic or that we don't know about because there's not whistleblowers most of the time. And fortunately, there aren't fatalities most of the time. And there are probably some fatalities that we don't know about. I'm not saying that there's lots, I'm just saying it probably happens. But what gun owners need to realize is that these are not flukes or aberrations. When you have a regulatory agency, it is incentivized to have a combative and aggressive mindset towards whatever it is it's regulating. No regulatory agency is going to take the position that, you know what, thing we're regulating, it's fine as it is, and honestly, our agents don't have much to do. They're never going to say that, even if it's true. It's always going to be in their incentive, in their interests, to always say there's a big problem and we need more funding and we need more people. They need more employees, because more employees translates to more power, both because they'll be ordering the higher ups in the organization will have more people under their control, and also just the bigger the organization is, the more union members it has, the more clout it has. And then the other thing is that law enforcement agencies have the government in general, since it's based on taxes, doesn't have a good way to show whether it's doing a good job. With a real service, and what the government does is not technically a service, because when you have a service, both parties have to agree to pay. Classic example, I live where it snows a lot. Sometimes in the winter, people will go around asking if they'd like to, if they could shovel your driveway. And if someone came and said, "Hey, I'd like to shovel the snow from your driveway," and I say, "You know what? I'd appreciate that. How much do you charge?" We agree on a price, say $10. They do it, I pay them. It's a service. However, if I woke up one morning and my driveway was clear and there's a guy standing there saying, "Hey, you owe me $10," and I say, "Well, wait a second. I didn't agree to that. I was going to shovel it myself. I don't mind that there's snow on it or whatever." It doesn't matter what my reason is. I don't owe him $10. He didn't provide me a service. He did a physical task that he assigned to himself and expects me to pay for it. What the government does is always of the latter category, or nearly so. I guess not always. But if it's totally based on taxation, which to one degree or another all government functions are, then taxation is the latter category. They're doing something and they're just saying, "Well, you owe us for that." Now, they still have. This makes, if it is a service, as long as we're agreeing to pay, then I know we can say, "Hey, you and the guy shoveling your driveway, he's getting results because you're happy, and if he ever does a crappy job or takes too long or whatever, you stop paying him, and that's how you know." When, like the government, they don't really have a way, and so a huge part of government is to try and find rubrics to show that they're doing a good job. This is in public schools. This is evidenced by all the standardized testing. There is no way to judge whether even standardized testing tells you anything, let alone what kind of standardized testing could or should be used. In law enforcement, a lot of times what it translates to show you're a good job is to have bodies. They go fishing. If they can say, "Look, we have caught this many people, criminals," they'll say, "that's evidence that we're doing a good job, that we deserve the money that we're taxing from you." And so, your normal cops, it's going to be how many tickets can they write, how many parking tickets, how many speeding tickets. If they're cops that are in a job that, it's a little bit more intense, it's how many people can they catch. In the BATF, it's how many people can they prosecute. If you want to get a promotion, you prosecute a lot of people. It doesn't necessarily have to result in actual convictions. It doesn't have to be people who are actually criminals. It just has to be something that can be in the paper. Look, ATF caught somebody. And this is real common. They don't care really even if people are convicted, because if it gets in the press, then that's all that matters. If the trial goes bad, it won't be big news. This isn't ATF, but when the FBI raided those Hutari militia in southeast Michigan, it was in the press for like 2 days. It was the #1 story for a day or two, and it was a big story for about a week. The trial hasn't finished, but I think there's a good chance when it's all said and done that none of them will be convicted of anything, or if they'll be convicted of anything, it will be very minor offenses. This wasn't a case where they were on the verge of launching a revolution. The whole thing was instigated, really. But that doesn't matter because the press isn't covering it anymore. So we had a couple days where it looked like the FBI was a heroic agency that spared us the inconvenience of modern day revolutionaries. Again, that wasn't the ATF, but the ATF is doing the same thing with the gun runner case. Did the same thing in Waco. Did the same thing in Ruby Ridge. It does the same thing. Nobody died here, but they just decided that they were going to regulate airsoft guns. There are I guess there's a big market for pellet guns that look like real guns. They look like an M1A, they look like a AR-15 or whatever, but they shoot plastic pellets. They aren't even metal. They don't have firing pins. You couldn't fire a real bullet for them, but they just decided this is a menace, and they confiscated like the whole shipload of them. They are inherently going to be against gun owners. That's their job. Rhetorically, they're not going to come out and say we hate gun owners, and I don't think that they actually do hate gun owners, but they have to look like they're doing something to justify their obscene budget, which is always growing. They wanted money. This gun runner is a classic example. They were going to say, hey, there's a big problem with our guns going to Mexico and fueling the drug violence. So obviously, the drug violence there has nothing to do with drug policy. So they decided to manufacture the evidence to justify this. And why I'm singling them out, but this is typical of all government agencies. But since this is an agency that's actively attempting to disarm the American people to whatever degree it thinks it can, which is to say that they're not going to go door to door tomorrow, and they might not ever go door to door for everything, but anything that they think they can get away with, they will. And any degree of harassment they think they can get away with, they will, because that's a body, that's a number. They think in statistics. When I pay that guy to shovel my driveway, I think about satisfaction. I'm satisfied that my driveway's clear. I'm not thinking, I really want him to have my driveway be clear of snow 18 days a year or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. That matters to them, because they have to have a chart that says, hey, we did this for so many days. We caught this many people. We prosecuted this many people. We convicted this many people. The convictions are less important, but they'll count those too. So the ATF is not our friend. It's not our ally. It's not to be respected. The only ones who are to be respected are the tiny, tiny minority who whistleblow. And of course, these are the bureaucracy is against those people. Those people, that's how you don't get promoted, is to do that. There's all this political rhetoric that, oh yeah, whistleblowing, transparency, bullshit. They don't give it. That's the worst thing you can do in the bureaucracy. There's two kinds of people in government. You've got the charismatic liars who become politicians, and they're really good at persuading people to vote for them. And then you have the bureaucracy, and the incentive there is different. It's not to be clever, it's not to be charismatic, it's not to be a go-getter, it's to be a yes man. It's to do what you're told without asking any questions, and to do it as good as possible, and not to rock the boat. So whistleblowing is the worst thing that they can do for their career in bureaucracy. Now, if they're really smart, like maybe Joe Bannister, can make another career, a good career. But BATF is incentivized to be against you and your guns, and they're always going to be that way, and they should be abolished, among others.